For all of you that are here, I'm so excited to be able to connect with you. I know there are people engaging with us online, so we're thrilled to have you join us as well. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Justin, and I'm the executive pastor. And as we get started with this next week of our series, I do want to start with a story. In February of 1944, the Gestapo would raid the Ten Boom house. And this is, a few of them were arrested. You've got Casper, he's the father, his daughter Betsy, and his other daughter Corey. And they're all arrested for their role in the resistance, which at that time, in 1944, in February, they had hidden and harbored and given safe haven to nearly 800 Jews to save them from the wrath of the Gestapo. And Casper and his daughters, they were sent to the concentration camps where Betsy and Corey, their father passed. His name's Casper. He passed after about 10 days in imprisonment. But Corey and Betsy were ultimately sent to the Ravensbrück labor camp for women. And it was there that after they smuggled in a Bible from the outside, that they were able to start sharing Jesus very intensely. And so they would work really, really hard, work so hard during the day, and they would bring and try to bring hope and encouragement in the evenings when they would read from God's word after it had been smuggled in. And so that continued for a while until December of 1944. And Betsy's health, it deteriorated because of the cruelty, because of the harshness, because of the lack of health care. She passed, leaving Corey all alone. In fact, after that, 12 days later, Corey would be released from the labor camp, and she would come to find out later it was on a clerical error because everybody else in her age demographic was sent to the gas chambers a week later. For all of her experiences, for all of Corrie ten Boom's experiences, when she writes in her memoir, The Hiding Place, one of the most pivotal moments of her life actually came a couple years later. It's a couple years after World War II had ended. And she writes about this experience she had. She went back to Germany and she's speaking and giving a message at a church. And this is what she explains, that she recognizes this man in the audience. She recognized him as a particularly cruel guard of their time. A guard at the camp that led to the murder of her sister. And she's so nervous and so worried and concerned with, is he going to recognize me? After her message, this guard approaches her, eyeball to eyeball. And this is what he says. You mentioned Ravensbrück in your talk. I was a guard there. So no, he did not remember her. And this is what he says. Since that time, I've become a Christian. And I know that God has forgiven me for the cruel things I did there. But I would like to hear it from your lips, Fraulein. In other words, miss. And his hand came out, and he asked this, will you forgive me? What do? How is she going to respond in that moment? How could she accept that someone like this had changed? How could she accept that they're supposed to be part of the same church? They're supposed to be on the same team now? How could there ever be unity between people with such radically different pasts? How is she supposed to accept this person at all? I get this is a very extreme example. I understand that. It's probably not what you're thinking about the people in your life. You may not have such an extreme story. But when you think about it, are there people in your life that you've written off? What about you? Are there people in your life that you've let go of that are disqualified in your mind? They just have too much in their past. They hurt me too intensely. They wounded me too deeply. They are written out of my book and there's no way they can ever get back in. Are there people like that for you? Can you imagine a face? Maybe several faces. And maybe you're not the one giving it. Maybe you're the one receiving, on the receiving end of rejection like that. Maybe you've been judged. Maybe you've become isolated. And maybe you feel unacceptable. I do not know what your story is. And there's lots in this room, and there's lots online. I don't know the details of your past or your story, but what I do know, what I believe, is that today is going to hold a lot of hope. Because as we continue our series, this unexpected journey, looking at the life of Paul that God used to transform the world, the thing is, while we look at his life, and you may be prone, if you know anything about his story, you may know, oh, he's got lots of accomplishments. He's got lots of accomplishments. He wrote probably about half of what we consider the New Testament. He planted tons of churches. He did missionary journeys all over the known world at that time. And you look at a guy like that and his laundry list of accomplishments and be like, wow. And yet the thing is, when you go a little bit deeper in the background of his story, none of it would have happened. None of it would have happened without the loving invitations of Jesus and the unparalleled acceptance of two obedient guys in his life. That's the origin of his story. It's this unparalleled acceptance that they offered to Paul, that we're going to see in a bit, that makes it possible for us to offer unparalleled acceptance. And I believe that we can, because of two invitations that Jesus makes through his obedient servants in the story we're going to look at. I believe we can offer unparalleled acceptance to others. Now, as soon as we say the word acceptance, you may be thinking of our world and our culture and what you see on Facebook and other social media platforms. The term acceptance in our world and our culture, it's really loaded. Typically, and this is just the way maybe our world and our culture has defined it, but acceptance, you may see it or may have thought of it, or we're told to think about it. We've got to affirm that everything is right, good, normal, and true. And if we don't affirm it, then we are intolerant. That's when the world thinks of acceptance, our culture thinks of acceptance, that's what's seen as acceptance. Yet it's very different from the acceptance that Jesus offered, this unparalleled acceptance. See, Jesus' acceptance, his style of acceptance looked far different. It looked like sacrificially loving a person despite what they've done without affirming their sin. Both were possible. That's unparalleled acceptance, right? Loving a person so sacrificially despite their past, despite what they've done, despite what's in it, but without affirming sin. We see it. We see it last week when Jesus and Saul have this encounter. Well, really, Saul encounters Jesus. I mean, Jesus goes to him, offers him love, offers him calling, offers him purpose and mission, but also is really clear, why are you persecuting me, right? There's a sacrificial love, and yet he calls sin, sin. The thing about Jesus-style acceptance, this unparalleled acceptance, if we avoid calling sin, sin, that's not loving, that's not acceptance, that's not true. And yet, if all we do is rail against other people's sin, see, for so many people, that sin thing, it gets intertwined with our identity. And when someone rails only against it without loving us, we just feel like they're rejecting us. So that's why I think that if we're going to accept unparalleled acceptance, it comes through sacrificial love despite what the other person has done without affirming sin. That's what I'm talking about. Kind of like aside. When I say acceptance, unparalleled acceptance, that's what I mean. And I think we're able to offer that because of the two invitations we see Jesus make through his obedient servants in this story. So let's set the scene and let's get into our story. So last week we looked at Saul. He was the main character, and yes, he's the main character again. In fact, we're going to kind of backtrack over maybe some ground we've already covered, but I don't want to focus just on Saul. I actually want to focus on the supplemental characters in the story that make Saul who he is. And so we're going to look at some of the same stuff, but we're going to look at it from some different perspectives. And so last week what had happened is Jesus had appeared to Saul. He'd blinded him. And I just want you to know, I'm going to totally mess up at some point and call someone Saul or Paul. They're the same guy. So trippy. Okay, Saul is his Hebrew name. Paul is his Greek name. And I'm going to probably confuse the two. No, I'm talking about the same man. Sound good? You can shake your heads. That's totally fine. Great. So Jesus had an encounter with Paul that left him blind, and so he's led into town. As he's there, he's praying, and he hasn't had anything to eat or drink for 3 days. That's the moment we're entering our story. Meanwhile, while that's happening, here's what's going on. In Damascus, this is in Acts 9, verse 10. You can follow along up there if you've got your phone or your Bible. You do you. That works. In Damascus, there was a disciple named Ananias. The Lord called to him in a vision, "Ananias." "Yes, Lord," he answered. The Lord told him, "Go to the house of Judas on Straight Street and ask for a man from Tarsus named Saul, for he is praying. In a vision, he has seen a man named Ananias come and place his hands on him to restore his sight." And what I think so cool is that God's will is perfect. And if God's will is perfect, we're going to pray for his perfect will. He puts prayers within the hearts of his people that he intends to answer. That's really neat to me. And get this, Saul is praying for Ananias to show up, and Ananias' obedience is literally God's answer to prayer. Have you ever thought about your obedience being the same way? That your obedience to a calling, to a prompting, to the voice of God is really God's answer to prayer for someone else. It's just a mind-blowing thought. But that's what's going on here. So Jesus tells Ananias that's what he's got to do. And Ananias chimes in with this. "Lord," Ananias answered, "I've heard many reports about this man and all the harm he has done to your holy people in Jerusalem. And he has come here with authority from the chief priests to arrest all who call on your name." And he kind of lets Jesus know as if Jesus did not know that. I don't know if you've heard. Like, oh, it's like this is news. No, I mean, he knows. He knows. And that's why I just love Jesus' response. "But the Lord said to Ananias, 'Go!'" Exclamation point. When you get an exclamation point from Jesus, you should go. "Go!" Exclamation point. And then he says this man is my chosen instrument to proclaim my name to the Gentiles and their kings. And Gentiles would be non-Jewish people, to the Gentiles and their kings and to the people of Israel. I will show him how much he must suffer for my name. As I read this, I was kind of struck by a couple of things I just wanted to share with you I thought were really interesting and popped out. For one, I just love the fact that Jesus says "go!" exclamation point, and he doesn't give a whole lot of explanation. He doesn't complete the script for Ananias. He doesn't say, "I know you're afraid, but let me tell you how everything works out." He doesn't get any of that. For all Ananias knows, he's going to go. He's going to do this thing. And before Saul's changed, he kills Ananias. He doesn't know. He doesn't know the end of the story. He doesn't know where he knows what obedience looks like, but he's just got to go. And I love the fact that, man, this is real life in real time. I don't know what Ananias was doing when he heard. I mean, maybe he was praying. I'm not sure. But it wasn't like Ananias went up on this mountaintop experience to hear the voice of God. It was in real life and in real time. I love that. The second thing I really think is cool is chosen instrument. And when you look at it, that word, it means that there is a strong favor for the one that's chosen, but it's not dependent upon anything that thing has done. In other words, Jesus chooses Saul, but not because of specific skill sets or because he's done a whole bunch. He just chooses him to show his favor. Saul wasn't picked because he earned it. He did the exact opposite of earning it. Saul was picked, and Jesus began the work of changing him. It's the other thing that I was thinking about this week. Man, Saul's life and his background, he is a zealous, passionate, he is a super Jewish guy. And so Jesus is like, I know what I'm going to do. He's going to go to all the non-Jews. Yes! It's like, what in his past would make him particularly good at that? Why? I mean, Jesus knows exactly what he's doing, so I'm throwing the question out, but I'm not really questioning it. It's just nuts to think about. He's a super Jewish guy. He doesn't hang out with Gentiles. He's going to be my chosen instrument to go to the Gentiles. What? I love. Jesus equips those he calls. He transforms people, and he deals in potential and not proof. He sees what people can be. I love that. The invitation that we see from Jesus through Ananias here is this, that Jesus invites people into his mission before they prove themselves. He invites people into his mission before they prove themselves. Yes, Ananias laid his hands on him for sure. But Jesus said go, and it was Jesus that was going to make him a chosen instrument. Jesus invites people into his mission before they prove themselves. I just want to submit this to you. How can we do anything differently? Why would we do anything differently? That's what unparalleled acceptance looks like. That's what we're called to offer. What if a key part of our role, your and mine, in God's unfolding story is championing others to become who God created them to be? What if you get to be a cheerleader, a champion? What if that's your role? What if that's what you're called to? What if that's what unparalleled acceptance looks like? That's the first invitation that we see. And so when Ananias goes to Saul, graciously, he does not lead with the, I will show you how much you must suffer line, right? Because you'd be like, that would really sock it to him. Hey, Jesus sent me because he said you're going to suffer real bad. All right. You know what I mean? No, he goes with goes with a totally loving spirit and attitude. Just take a look at this. This is so cool. Then Ananias in verse 17 went to the house and entered it. Placing his hands on Saul, he said, Brother Saul. I don't remember Jesus telling him to call him brother. Maybe he did, and it's not recorded. That's fair. But I believe in this moment, Ananias approaches Saul this way, and it's an overflow of his heart. Brother Saul, the Lord Jesus, who appeared to you on the road as you were coming here, has sent me so that you may see again and be filled with the Holy Spirit. I love the fact that Jesus sent Ananias. He could have just talked to Saul and filled him right there himself on the road, but he chooses to work through his obedient people. That's neat. And he calls him brother. It's such a term. This is like familial kinship. This is community. This is an overflow of Ananias' heart. And this is, you want to talk about unparalleled acceptance? This is it. In the room with someone who wanted to murder you just a few days ago. And now you're inviting him in. Brother. What? See, it's perhaps this moment of unparalleled acceptance in Paul's life that he will later express to the church in Galatia about 15 years later when he writes this. There is neither Jew nor Gentile, neither slave nor free, nor is there male and female, for you are, get this, are all one in Christ Jesus. That's the unity. That's the invitation. That's the acceptance, the unparalleled acceptance that Paul experienced. At the hands of Ananias, no less. And then get this. Immediately at this moment, something like scales fell from Saul's eyes and he could see again. He got up and was baptized, and after taking some food, he regained his strength. And get this, Saul spent several days with the disciples in Damascus. They're all part of the same small group. That's cool. And the disciples we're talking about here, this is not the apostles minus Judas. This is part of the 120 that grew to 3,000 on Pentecost that were growing daily and got spread all over the place when the persecution that this guy, Saul, started. And they're spending time with him. And get this, there's no teaching he had to understand first. There's no theology he had to wrap his mind around. There's no cleaning up his behavior. He didn't have time. There's no acts of obedience or penance that are required first. There was not even a season of shame or depression that Saul had to go through before he was brought into the family. He's baptized, and he was immediately brought in. And they're hanging out with him. The disciples in Damascus, that community there, they understood unparalleled acceptance, and they trusted Jesus enough to offer it to Saul. That's cool. This is the second invitation that we see in the story. that Jesus invites people into his family before they do anything to earn it. He invites people into his mission before they prove themselves. He invites people into his family before they do anything to earn it. Yes, Ananias went and laid hands, but it was Jesus that said go, exclamation point. It was the Holy Spirit who filled Saul, and it was the power of God that caused the scales to fall off his eyes and he could see. And then he's baptized, and that baptism matters because when you and I and Saul, when we go down in the water, we come up out of the water, we identify in unity with Jesus in the death, burial, and his resurrection. It becomes ours. And Jesus invites people into his family before they do anything to earn it. So how could we do anything differently? That's unparalleled acceptance. And I believe that when we invite people into his mission before they prove themselves, when we invite people into his family before they do anything to earn it, if we will do that, we help champion others to become who God created them to be. We get to be champions of other people. And we see it in this story. We see it in Ananias. And yet there was another guy that completely changed Saul's journey we're going to get to in just a second. And look at how Saul's journey progresses. At once he began to preach in the synagogues that Jesus is the Son of God. All those who heard him were astonished and asked, "Isn't he the man who raised havoc in Jerusalem among those who call on this name? And hasn't he come here to take them as prisoners to the chief priests?" It's incredulous. Yet Saul grew more and more powerful and baffled the Jews living in Damascus by proving that Jesus is the Messiah. And there's just a little bit of time before that being baffled becomes being angry. And so in verse 23, this is where we take over from last week. After many days had gone by, there was a conspiracy among the Jews to kill him. But Saul learned of their plan, and day and night they kept a close watch on the city gates in order to kill him. And so, but his followers, they took him by night, they lowered him in a basket down the wall, and he escapes Damascus. And he heads to Jerusalem, the place where the movement got started, the epicenter of everything, where the persecution started. He was the one that started it. And he gets there. But get this, when he came to Jerusalem, this is in verse 26, he tried to join the disciples. This is the apostles. This is the 12 minus Judas. He tried to join the disciples, but they were all afraid of him. They're all afraid of him, not believing that he really was a disciple. He hasn't changed. Shunned, isolated, rejected, disconnected. That's kind of Saul's, that could have been the end of Saul's journey. Have you felt like this? Have you felt disconnected and isolated, rejected? Maybe that's your story. Maybe that's the reason, whether you're in the room or whether you're online, you've been away so long because of the way you were treated. Or maybe you're here, maybe you've always tried to be, but you always feel this constant weight and tension of having to prove that your past is really in your past and that you are changed. And you're exhausted from having to live with that kind of weight. Or maybe you've experienced the rejection of God, or you've experienced the rejection of people, and it makes you feel like you are rejected by God. Maybe that's your story. But maybe you can relate to the way Saul may have been feeling right at this moment. This could have been the end of an unexpected journey, a short-lived calling. And it was at this moment in Saul's story that it would take another obedient servant to extend some invitations, to be a champion, to offer unparalleled acceptance. And that guy's name, Barnabas. What a name. Enter Barnabas. Because in verse 27, but Barnabas took him and brought him to the apostles. What? Barnabas wasn't even the dude's real name. Guy's name was Joseph, Joe. No, average Joe. But they named him. His nickname was Barnabas because it means son of encouragement, and the guy was just so encouraging. So we'll just call you the encourager, son of encouragement. So Barnabas, he vouches and he brings Saul, who's rejected at this moment, to the apostles. And he told them how Saul on his journey had seen the Lord and that the Lord had spoken to him how in Damascus he had preached fearlessly in the name of Jesus. This is cool. Now, Barnabas, he's mentioned earlier on. We just didn't mention him in the story so far until this week. But Barnabas is mentioned. He's a figure in the church in Jerusalem. I mean, anybody that can just kind of go and bring somebody to the apostles has to have some significant leadership capital, right? And that means he probably had been there for some time. He knew, he maybe saw all of the terrible things that Saul had done in the city. I don't know. But maybe Barnabas was even one of the godly men who picked up the broken body of Stephen and buried him from a couple of weeks ago. Don't know. But Barnabas vouches for Saul, offers him an unparalleled acceptance, and it changes everything for him. Because of what Barnabas did, this is what happens to Saul. So Saul stayed with them, and moved about freely in Jerusalem, speaking boldly in the name of the Lord. Maybe this is where Paul kind of firmed up. He got to talk to the eyewitnesses that saw the raised to life Jesus, that saw the empty tomb. Maybe he got to talk to them and hear some of those firsthand accounts. And I don't know, maybe that really bolstered his faith, his witness, his testimony. But he stays with them. And because of this act of unparalleled acceptance, look what happens to the church. It says in verse 31, the church throughout Judea, Galilee, and Samaria enjoyed a time of peace and was strengthened, living in the fear of the Lord and encouraged by the Holy Spirit. It increased in numbers. There was peace because the one who had been murdering the community of Jesus followers had been offered unparalleled acceptance into it. That changes things. Barnabas plays a significant role. Barnabas is a champion. And he wasn't, this is what I love, he's not finished in Saul's story either. We're going to go a couple chapters in the couple chapters forward to kind of pick up where Saul's story goes next. And as we do, when we read the book of Acts, when we look at it together, we see all these different cities mentioned in these different places, and they just are like words on a page sometimes to me. But I was a history teacher, and so we're going to do some maps. Okay, so I want to show you some things. So rather than show you all the verses, I want to show you the stuff on the map. Now, this is how the story's moving so far. Now, those who had been scattered by the persecution that broke out when Stephen was killed. And so Stephen was killed in Jerusalem. Bam, this is so cool. Already I'm loving this. Okay, so the persecution breaks out in Jerusalem. They're scattered, it says, to Phoenicia, right? To Cyprus. Cyprus is that little island right there. And then they traveled as far as Phoenicia, Cyprus, and then all the way to Antioch, which is a couple hundred miles. So they traveled to these places, and as they're doing it, they're talking about Jesus and spreading the good news of Jesus, but only to the Jewish communities at that point. But then some of them, some guys from Cyprus and Cyrene, so look all the way here, right? And so I don't know if people ended up going from Jerusalem to Cyrene, or if there's some guys in Cyrene that just happened to be on the island when they went to Cyrene. I don't really know. But anyway, guys from Cyprus and Cyrene, they decide, hey, we're going to go to Antioch. And they go to Antioch. Also from Cyrene, they go to Antioch. So you're talking about just so they can start talking to people about Jesus. But now they're talking not just to the Jewish communities. They're starting to talk to the non-Jewish Greek communities, which hadn't been done really. This is cool. They're telling them the good news about the Lord Jesus. So you see, it's not just cities on a map. You're talking about a movement that's swelling. And it says this, that the Lord's hand was with them, those that went to go talk to the Greek communities. And a great number of people believed and turned to the Lord. Now, there's success there. People who are not Jewish are starting to follow Jesus. And the church in Jerusalem, it says this, news of this reached the church in Jerusalem. So in Antioch, word spreads all the way down to Jerusalem. So Jerusalem's like, what are we going to do about it? So they decide, we're going to send our good friend Barnabas. So Barnabas heads to Antioch to check it out, which makes sense because you want to send the most encouraging dude you know. We'll just send the guy that's named Encourager, right? So they send Barnabas. This is a huge moment for the movement. This is a huge moment for what it means to follow Jesus. It had only gone to Jews at this point. Now there was a wall in the crack dividing Jew and Gentile. And they send Barnabas to discover and check it out. And this is what he does. When he arrived and saw what the grace of God had done, he was glad. He was glad. and encouraged them, makes sense, them all to remain true to the Lord with all their hearts. He was a good man, full of the Holy Spirit and faith, and a great number of people were brought to the Lord. What would you give to have the Bible write that about you? For that to be your story. These are the words that are said only about those who through the grace of God are willing to offer the unparalleled acceptance of Christ. Inviting people into his family before they do anything to earn it, and inviting people into his mission before they prove themselves. This is a neat moment for the church, but Barnabas is not done with Saul. Get this. This is so exciting. Look at what Barnabas does next. Then Barnabas, then Barnabas went all the way to Tarsus to look for Saul. Saul's at home. This is Saul's hometown. Barnabas goes out of his way, goes to Saul's hometown, drives up, honks the horns like, dude, you got to get it. We got to go. He goes and finds him. Why? Because Saul was the chosen instrument to the Gentiles. And Barnabas' role in the story is as a champion. It was God's plan being carried out by an obedient servant named Barnabas, just as it had with Ananias. So Barnabas goes and looks for Saul, and get this, when he found him, he brought him to Antioch. So for a whole year, Barnabas and Saul, they met with the church and taught great numbers of people. And the disciples were called Christians first at Antioch. In other words, Saul, the one who had a reputation for killing Christians, is intricate in the development of the community where they're first called Christians, little Christs. That's mind-blowing. And all because of Barnabas being a champion. This is what got Saul into missionary work. This is what got Saul fulfilling his calling. Saul owes missionary opportunity and beginnings to Barnabas. Ananias and Barnabas were key champions in Saul's story, and they offered the unparalleled acceptance of Christ. It's because Jesus offers unparalleled acceptance, inviting people into his mission before they prove themselves, and inviting people into his family before they earn it. It's because of that, and he's done it for each one of us, that we have the opportunity to do the same, to champion others to become who God created them to be. This kind of unparalleled acceptance, this kind of championing of others is only possible because of the gospel, because of the good news of what Jesus has done. See, Saul encountered the glory of Jesus on the road. And he concluded at that moment, he encountered the glory of Jesus. He concluded that Jesus was alive, that death could not hold him, the grave could not keep him, and that everything Jesus said about being the Messiah to save the world from its sin was all true. He was exactly who he said he was. And it was the same Jesus that invited Saul in. You want to talk about unparalleled acceptance, because this is what Saul says, that the same power, the same spirit that raised Jesus from the dead, unparalleled acceptance lives within you if you're a Jesus follower. You've been accepted. And this is what Paul says. You have received the spirit of adoption as sons, by whom we cry, get this, Abba, Father, Daddy, Father. The Spirit himself bears witness with our spirit that we are children of God, who through faith in Jesus have been brought into a new family, adopted in. That's good news. It's that good news in us and through us that empowers us to live this way to others. And if we will live in light of that good news, I think it can look a lot like this. I want to finish up Corrie ten Boom's story, because we just kind of left it right there, like the most pivotal part. She's eyeball to eyeball with this cruel guard. And he's extended his hand to shake hers and asks for forgiveness. What would she do? And this is what she writes. This was her prayer. She says this. She prayed, Jesus, help me. I can lift up my hand, but you have to do the rest. Notice she obeys first. And she lifted her hand woodenly and mechanically, she writes. And she said the warmth started in her shoulder, worked its way down her arm, and ended in her hand as she clutched this man's hand. And at that moment, she experiences the love of God. And she cries out this, I forgive you, brother, with my whole heart. And they stood clutching hands awkwardly for a little bit. Prisoner, eye to eye with a guard, made one by Jesus. And this is what she writes of that. She said, I had never known God's love so intensely as I did there. That's cool. She experienced Christ's acceptance for her, his unparalleled acceptance for her, and it empowered her to offer unparalleled acceptance to this guard. When you and I come to grips with the love of Christ for us, the one that by faith brings us in, adopts us, and puts us in the same family, when we experience and come to grips with that love of Christ, that is exactly what flows through us to others. It's the love that you and I experience. That's the love that you and I get to express. And if we'll do that, when we encounter that way, we are free to champion others to become who God created them to be. Let's be champions. Let's invite people into God's family with a lot of grace. And let's involve people in Jesus' mission by taking them with us. Be like Barnabas. Who can you bring with you? Who can you go find? Who can you take with you to serve? Do that. Let's be champions. It's your unparalleled acceptance that champions others to take their next step on an unexpected journey. Let's do that. Father, thank you so much. Thank you so much for revealing your love to us through your son Jesus on the cross. You've made a way for us to be with you. You've made a way for the disconnect to no longer be there. You have offered us such unparalleled acceptance. Help us to respond to that love now. And help that to flow from us to the world, to the community in this room, to the communities and neighborhoods that we're all a part of. Show us each what our next step is. We love you. And it's in your powerful name, Jesus, that we pray these things together. Amen.